sometimes, but I'm indifferent.
Fantastic. All right. Well, this is Craig LeBlanc again with the Bitcoin Daily Show. I'm one of 12 hosts that run the Bitcoin Daily 8 to 10 Eastern every day for the last 280 plus, almost approaching 300 straight days. Every show is different. We have a different show host, and we bring on some great guests and speakers and have a lot of people that just follow and listen to us. And so I've been following Nicholas actually just on his Twitter feed. I noticed he has a lot of good stuff to say, and he reposts a lot of good stuff, posts a lot of good stuff. And so I just thought he was really interesting. I thought it might be good for the community to just maybe get to know him a little bit better, where he came from, where he's at, and kind of where he's going. And so welcome to the show, Nico. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah. Hi, Craig. Yeah. Thanks for inviting us. That's good.
Yeah. So how did you get involved in the or maybe give us your background? Let's go with the background first from birth. Like, where are you from? Brothers, parents, what did they do?
Yeah, well, I'm British, not born in England. I have a French mother, so I was born in France, but never actually lived there. Always lived in England. Yeah, grew up in London. You know, nice, big, dirty, dangerous city at the time, like New York or LA, I guess, but with worse weather. Yeah, had really normal upbringing. I guess my dad wasn't the most normal dad. He was a musician, so I got exposure to like the music industry.
What did he play?
He's by trade, he's a saxophonist. He's a jazz musician, but he did make, to pay the rent, to provide for his family, he had to do pop music. I guess he's well known for the saxophone solo of George Michael, Careless Whisper. That's my claim to fame.
You are kidding. That is your father?
Yeah, if you Google it, Steve Gregory, you can find some old videos of him. You might recognize some of the facial features, but yeah. But
that is a claim to fame. Yeah, that is like a global hit.
I guess. Sometimes the guys tweet and make jokes about it, because he showed up to a Bitcoin meetup in South London and said, "Oh, I'm sons of him," and then one of the other guys were musicians, so they started tweeting about it about a year ago, which was quite funny because he got into Bitcoin early, didn't know anything about Bitcoin. My dad, he just randomly phoned me up and said, "What's interesting in tech? Got any things to buy?" And I said, "Oh, Bitcoin," and didn't really know much at the time, but so he goes to the meetup sometimes out of curiosity.
How old is he now?
Oh, he's old. I mean, he's 78. But he still plays. He still teaches kids, and occasionally playing a jazz bar. Stays active.
So, do you have any siblings, or is it just you? Or
yeah, I have a little sister. Bit of an age gap. Well, 7 years. I guess that crushes over time. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. You get closer and closer as you get older. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I'm 13 years older than my brother, but now it's almost like we're practically the same age.
Yeah, you can do sports with him now. When he was young, he was couldn't even play computer games with him. But
right.
Yeah. But yeah, grew up in London. Then I got in, studied software engineering, spent a lot of time in the US, lived 2 years in San Diego and almost 10 in New York. I think it was when I was in New York is when I got into Bitcoin, moved back to London 2017 and been doing Commerce Block ever since.
Now, what caused all the moves and stuff? What made you want to come to the US? What made you want to go back home?
Just I was working in software. Clearly, the US is a mecca in terms of the first time was to be in Silicon Valley. I didn't like Silicon Valley one bit, so the market was so buoyant. I could go to San Diego. Silicon Valley just had too much concrete, too much work, too many men. San Diego, beach lifestyle, a bit more diverse in terms of male to female ratio, and that's it. And nature was pretty nice there. Then I came back to the UK, and then I ended up working. I'm a software dev, but I ended up working for banks for a while, and then they moved me. They offered me a job around 2010. I was working at Merrill Lynch, so I transferred 2010, and 2017. I was starting to get the age where I thought I didn't really want to live in the US forever. I had a partner then who wanted to experience Europe, so I was open to moving back. But no, I still deal a lot with the US. Clearly, being in the Bitcoin ecosystem, I talk to Americans every day, and I think it helps when you're British because of the language clearly. And but yeah,
and I get that sense that I know we kind of live in an echo chamber here on X and in Bitcoin, but it seems like it's still a very American phenomenon. It's a very even white male, certain age bracket, and because I look at my listeners now, I'm starting to see spread more into a lot of other countries and a lot of other demographics and stuff. But I wonder why it just launched there. That seems to be even today, it's a high concentration of middle-aged white men, Americans, and even actually an outsized amount of Canadians and and English.
It's weird because there is a different culture of Bitcoin, I'd say, from like even the UK and like the US, like without offending anyone. I mean, I'd say in the US it's a bit more, right wing. No, I would say, Republican voting. And
Mhm.
that's, some of the American culture, although I'd say a lot of the devs are on the East and West Coast. In the UK, if you go to a Bitcoin meetup, it tends to be a bit more free Julian Assange t-shirts, a bit more lefty, which is kind of a bit of a difference I've noticed. Maybe, and I think that's maybe because I don't know, Bitcoin mean in the US, in the Europe is more about helping people that are unbanked, maybe sending money around the world where banks fail. I think US it's maybe more of a freedom movement, which is
Mhm.
that's one thing I've noticed. So yeah, Bitcoin's for everyone, and I've noticed that there is a bit of a culture here difference.
Yeah, I would say at least the people that I've seen on our shows are very libertarian
Mhm.
leaning. A lot of them were Ron Paul supporters. I don't know if you know who he was. He was a presidential candidate that
Yeah,
made
very
big,
much so. Yeah.
and so I would say a big chunk. Well, naturally, the first crowd is probably these cryptographers and these coders and these hackers. That was kind of the
Mhm.
early adopters. But then I think the libertarians that were seeking freedom, seeking independence, sovereignty from the government, that was the next big wave that came in. I think only now are you starting to see conservative Republicans start to pile in, but this is a recent class, maybe like the class of 23, 24, 22 is when they started piling in. At least that's kind of what I'm seeing on my end. Who are you seeing pile into your side? Like you said, maybe just the freedom people.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't. I mean, in the US, there's obviously a political movement with Bitcoin going on. I wouldn't say there is in the UK. However, there is a good grassroots movement. Like, it wasn't my idea, but a few other guys managed to orange pill like a local market in London, and that they managed to get 20 vendors. And these are, not right-leaning libertarians by no means. It's more of a grimy area of London, but the people don't necessarily like the banks. A lot of the people there are being debanked just for no real reason, that they're a cash business. And that's where I see the growth of Bitcoin in the UK, and I see something similar in France. It's not necessarily as right wing as it is in say the US. I've found more, definitely more, potentially even more left wing. Like last year, I went to a Bitcoin conference in south of France called Surfing Bitcoin. Quite a cool place in Biarritz, and it was definitely the French Bitcoiners were definitely more to the left, like than right, which I found
Hmm.
interesting. I mean, it's good though. I'm not going to get into politics, but I don't think it's healthy if Bitcoin's either left or right. It kind of gets
Me too.
pigeonholed. Yeah,
Me too. I think if you are pro theft or anti theft, that should be the thing that matters. If you
yeah.
like,
I mean, I'm pro less government, and I think in the UK, if you vote right or left, you both get lots of government. So that's the problem we have right now. So
that's
technology is meant to be reducing, make the world more efficient, but it doesn't seem to have happened when it comes to government. Certainly in Europe. So
yeah. So, what attracted you, or maybe what was your early days into Bitcoin? How did you discover it? How did you? Because we talked today on the show of how you really have to have a degree of humility to
mhm.
accept Bitcoin, because accepting Bitcoin means that everything you've learned till this point has been way off. And so, how was that journey for you?
So I used to, again, I'm a software engineer, but I did work for the banks. And when 2008 happened, I would say I
Mhm.
didn't. It was weird that I didn't really understand money because 2008, what happened? Banks went bankrupt and we printed money out of nowhere. So did start looking at gold and things like that. And then I did look at Bitcoin early on. I didn't really resonate with me. And in, I think maybe 2013, 12, a guy, I was in New York, came to the gym and said, "Let's mine Bitcoin." I was like, "What's he on about?" And then and I guess I didn't fall in love with Bitcoin straight away. There were things about it that maybe didn't work with my brain. The fact there was 10-minute block times, the fact it was built in C++, which I didn't really like as a programming language. Also, I always had this visual idea or mental idea that a virtual currency would be some sort of gift card that you scratch off. But even if it was technology, I didn't. The whole concept that Bitcoin, I mean, you don't really own Bitcoin. You have a private key, which is part of this network. That
Mhm.
took me a long time to get around. And then, but it was the community of Bitcoin that got me buzzed. When my friend said, let's mine Bitcoin, I Googled it. And then you had all these dudes in the middle of nowhere, the US, that had all these like weird contraptions to remove heat from their basement. And it was quite fun. And the culture was pretty cool. And then I read about the Silk Road, and maybe we shouldn't talk about the Silk Road too much, but I slowly got interested. I was lucky that New York had quite a good meetup scene. So I didn't really want to spend too much time learning the tech because I was writing code all day. And there was a bit devs in New York that helped. There was quite a few early Bitcoiners there that I guess became quite prominent now, and that helped. And I like the community. I was quite into the martial art community in New York, and a lot of them were into that kind of stuff because they were using it for the Silk Road, not necessarily to buy drugs, but buy medications that they couldn't get prescription for. And there was that whole culture, which was interesting.
Yeah, and I think maybe you can speak on that a little of how important the culture was and the people, because that's actually what got me. I don't have a coding background.
Hmm.
Everything I've learned through Bitcoin. I
Hmm.
actually am just a lifelong entrepreneur, but it was the people, the
Hmm.
social layer of Bitcoin. I was like, I want to be more like those people, because it doesn't just seem not only Bitcoin, but they have a lot of other things in their life that are going correct, from their diet, their mental framework, and everything else. And so if you want to surround yourself by good people, the Bitcoiners are a fantastic crowd to hang around. Was that so? How important was that for you?
Yeah, it was so, because you go to a meetup. I mean, after a few months, a lot of those guys became my friends. Yeah, I'd go hang out with them on weekends. So that was important. They were alternative. Not necessarily mad, but they're into alternative conversations, into not necessarily the mainstream media, and that was great, especially in New York, because New York's obviously the capital of wealth. I mean, you see money in New York that I don't see anywhere in the world. I mean, I don't see this in Europe. The Fifth Avenues and that. But then, having this kind of like underground scene right in the heart of New York, it was great. I mean, it gave me a set of friends and fitted
Yeah,
in with like my other hobbies. A lot of the people I trained jiu-jitsu with, for example, were into Bitcoin, and it was a great vibe, and it still is. I think. I mean, I
yeah.
still go to Bitcoin meetups in London. But as I said, different vibe, but still fun. Especially with COVID. Since COVID, I've been working from home. So me and my co-founder, we only meet up at Bitcoin meetups, and that's good.
So what's the meetup scene like there in London? How strong is it? How many people? How many different meetups do y'all have?
It's very different than my version of New York. And remember, New York was. I left New York in 2017. The Bit
Mhm.
Devs guys that I speak to in New York said, "Oh, it's totally changed since you came. When you were there, it was 20, 30 people. Now it's 100 plus."
Wow.
But yeah, in New York Bit Devs. And I never went back to New York ever. So it's different. It's smaller, but more. And I'd say in the last couple of years, maybe because of Lightning but there's more of a kind of like, there's a nice grassroots movement in the UK for people to use Bitcoin as a medium exchange, which I think is really good. And it's been a few guys that have pushed that. First people I knew was Bridges to Bitcoin, and you have Coin Corner that have got like the POS devices. I've been hanging out with a guy called Ashley Giles who basically got this market in South London, and it's a kind of like an old school 100-year-old market that's been around since the beginning of time. And these are old traders that still use cash. They do weird stuff like like old style record store and all this, and they were totally into it. And he managed to orange pill 20 stores there, and that's great. And that's great. It's different. And a lot of these market people are from diverse backgrounds. You pay them Bitcoin, barely know anything about it, and they realize, oh, I can keep it. And then they explain to you that when they send $700 back to Egypt, this is what one of the guys was saying to me, 80 goes to the remittance company, and they can now send it back to Bitcoin, and then they send it as Bitcoin, and their relatives can just flip it into a gift card and use it. So,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah,
that's
it really
fun.
is. It really is powerful in that way. I was showing a friend of mine last night who's new into Bitcoin, and really have. They were asking me how to get it off exchange onto their wallet, and I'm like, all right, let's just send a test transaction, and then we sent it, and then we sent the rest of the wallet over there, and I'm like, and that's done. That's final settlement.
Mhm.
The whole network's audited every 10 minutes, and you didn't need to ask permission of a bank or a state or a federal government. It just goes and it works. And you could have
Mhm.
done this, if we actually did it on a Sunday, um, at I think 8 o'clock at night, and anything else, banks, you got to be banking hours, and it takes forever, and it really doesn't finally settle for 2 months. And so, I think once the world wakes up to just the low amount of friction to transact on Bitcoin, I think that crowd has not yet shown up yet, because a lot of the hardware and software is still being built, like Lightning and a lot of other stuff. And is that
Mhm.
where you're working at right now, or maybe tell me about where that what kind are you working on right now?
Yes, I founded a company called Commerce Block in New York originally with some guys there. Then I moved back to London, still kept on doing it. Originally, we were building side chains, which, as you know, hasn't really necessarily been a success. But the learnings from that, we ended up building alternative layer twos. So as a company, we built something called Mercury Wallet, which became Mercury Layer, which is a different type of layer two for Bitcoin. And we do a lot of work at integrating it into Lightning. So we don't build a Lightning wallet, but we do a lot of Lightning routing infrastructure, and we're doing a lot of work moving that into Mercury. So Mercury is a different type of layer two than Lightning. It's more about moving around UTXOs. Hasn't had major traction. I mean, one of the reasons is Bitcoin fees are quite low. You go on mempool.space, you can send a Bitcoin transaction for 60 cents, which
Mhm.
if I'm one of my biggest surprises that I never thought we'd see 60k Bitcoin, or maybe today it's going to be 70k, and Bitcoin transaction fees being very low. So, because when I got into Bitcoin in the early days in New York, it was all about using it. I remember you'd go on Reddit.com, Reddit / Bitcoin, and you'd see who's supporting Bitcoin. Dell would support Bitcoin, Tesla. That's the excitement, and it has transitioned into a store of value more as a medium of exchange. But yeah, day to day, I'm still very much working on a Bitcoin company, building layer two infrastructure. I also have a side job where I work on a project called CivKit, which is a way of doing peer-to-peer trading. It's funded by guys in the global south, predominantly a guy called Ray Youssef, ex-Paxful founder. And yeah, that's fun. And I mean, that's a kind of like a side project I do. It's more of I wanted to kind of be involved with something truly open source, and that's a lot of fun. It's part-time for me and a couple of other part-time guys, and then 2 full-time devs funded by Ray's company, no-ones.com. And but that plays into what I do at Commerce Block. We obviously, it's based on Lightning, it's based on Nostra, it's for basically people in predominantly where Ray's based in Africa to basically do peer-to-peer trading. Because at the moment, a lot of these guys, they use Telegram, they use WhatsApp, which is good for them, but there's a lot of challenges because there's no real reputation. Like you go on a WhatsApp group, you go on a Telegram group. If the group vanishes the next day, you kind of have to start from scratch. So we're building a reputation system on top of Nostra that can work with Lightning to help these guys do peer-to-peer trading, and that's fun. And you're seeing how Bitcoin's really being used. So
Can you describe that problem a little bit more to people that don't understand the threat of having your stuff on, even something like Signal, which I think is the best guy they have going, but explain how
yeah,
Nostr addresses these problems of centralized
well,
communication like Telegram.
say for example, you run a OTC trade group on Telegram. You're the owner, but your reputation is that group, and certain traders that you trust. That because there's always a risk in OTC. The guy you're trading might be um, may not be honest and stuff. But as I think typically in OTC, people do small trades, they build up a reputation, but it's all kind of social reputation. It's all in that Telegram group. If Telegram decide to shut down your group one day, you as the owner lose the group and lose a potential revenue source, and all the guys or girls that have been trading there have lost their reputation.
Mhm.
So we're building a reputation system on top of Nostra based on your NPub, where your reputation isn't just because you're Dave in a group called I don't know, Sub-Saharan Trading Group. blah blah blah, your reputation can move with you, so you don't have to start again. I mean, there's still risks. Whenever you trade OTC, there's a risk. If me and you met in a pub in London and I could bosh you on the head, you could bosh me on the head, and that doesn't go away. But at least you've got a reputation that's tied to a system, and it's not necessarily tied to the Telegram group or whatever. So, and this is us not. This is how they trade right now. We do weekly spaces. Sometimes this is what they do day to day. So, and we're trying to take ideas of other people like Nostra, Lightning, and kind of make that a bit more permanent, so people are not tied to a WhatsApp group or a Telegram group. And yeah, it's interesting. It's fun. It helps push adoption.
Now, can you explain to the audience that really is not that familiar with Nostra what it is, kind of at a 5th grade level, and then where you think it's going? Where is it today? What's the state of the union today? Just kind of explain it to someone that doesn't know Nostra well.
Yeah, I wouldn't claim I'm a Nostra expert. I mean, Nostra is basically like a way of I'd say it's a format of API to do messaging. And what the initial guys did, I mean, it was invented by a guy called Fiat Jaff, who's a Lightning dev. I don't think he likes Lightning these days, but yeah, a lot of the idea was to build like these Nostra nodes, and you can start to replace social media so that your identity on Nostra is not tied to, say, X or Instagram or Facebook. It's tied to a key, a public key, and you can sign messages with that. And then instead of relying on a centralized server, you have these kind of like a cluster of relays, so your data can be propagated. But essentially, you decide what's your data. You decide where that's stored or how that's propagated. So the kind of apps you're seeing is like decentralized media, which is going to be a hard thing to do. And I don't actually use it that much. I mean, I'm trying to limit my interactions with social media, which is, but I feel for like peer-to-peer communication for doing trades. I think there's a lot of growth there. People are tired of centralization. It's not scaling after a while. It's becoming a bottleneck. So that's the movement of Nostra. Yeah.
Well, I think we recently saw a level of censorship that kind of was shocking to the world and eye-opening. And then with the whole Musk saga coming in and buying it for free speech, and then kind of forcing them to stop censoring us to some degree, I think gives a lot of momentum and traction to something like Nostra, which...
Well, yeah, I agree. And look, clearly there's a lot of people who build their careers, use things like Twitter to make revenue. They are essentially at the whims of a Twitter. I mean, for whatever reason, I know people in the UK that have been debanked just because their name is a bit Russian sounding, and we're not friends with Russia at the moment. Similar things are going to happen on social media platforms. Especially with AI is going to make it worse. There's going to be AI tools that are going to think that you're bad only and there could be a bug in the AI, and that's it. You're cancelled. You've lost your Twitter account. I think David Bailey got switched off yesterday, the CEO of...
No way.
So he got his account suspended last night, and now he's reinstated. And obviously, this is the worst week for David Bailey to be cancelled, clearly with Bitcoin Nashville. I don't know the reason he got suspended, and I don't know why he got put back in as well. But the fact is, there was some software there that decided that he's a bad person and he needs to be debanked, de-X'd or de-Twitter. And that's the problem we're living. I mean, the centralization, I always say centralization starts, and there's the camera, it starts like this, of a bunch of rules, and over time the rules get bigger. And at some point it's just unmanageable. And I think that's what's really happening with these things. They're unmanageable.
Yeah, it really is. And it's kind of like investing in another alternate token, altcoin. Until you get rug pulled, you're just like, it's fine. And so I think once we build a livelihood on Facebook or Twitter, and we're like, it's fine, they'd never rug pull me, and then all of a sudden they shut you down. Now all of a sudden the need for decentralization is apparent. But until then, everyone just assumes safety. I think it's part of human nature to say, the stove's not really hot. You just got to get burnt by it enough times. And I think we're getting burnt enough on so many fronts on centralized authorities that now we're starting to kind of wise up a little and start to build on decentralized platforms like Nostra.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a hard thing to do, and it's not just Nostra's trying to do it. I've been looking a lot at something that the guys at Tether have built, Hole Punch with pairs, and they're trying to build peer-to-peer framework for more kind of Nostra apps. So I think it really is a need right now, because our livelihoods are controlled by these centralized entities, and I'm not sure if they're going to work long term.
Yeah. Well, I think they'll work on the behalf of the people that have the centralized authority. I mean, that's kind of the point. Is it's just easier to control a group of people and siphon
Do you
energy.
think so? I mean, I have this feeling that over time, because regulations always get bigger, rules always get larger. At some point, everyone's going to be cancelled. At some point, it just closes up. I mean, I'm sure you saw what happened on Friday, where CrowdStrike basically took out 20% of the internet.
Yes. Oh
I
yeah,
just
we
think
still have planes struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's the problem with centralization. Yes, the people who run these platforms decide to put a load of rules in. Governments force them to do that. They want it because they've got a view of the world. But at some point, it centralizes so much that it becomes a liability. I mean, we can all say that we need better testing, or we can make jokes about how the developer wrote bad software, but Bitcoin works because it can't be shut down. Even if the Bitcoin core devs pushed out an update, the update it would take a while before the whole network's updated. There's a reason why truly decentralized, they're actually safer. They're less likely to blow up. I mean, software's still built by humans, and when AI builds software, it's probably even going to be harder to find bugs because there's going to be less people trained at finding bugs.
Yeah, we did chat about that today. Is that it's not so much a good versus evil, good versus bad. It's like friction versus non-friction. It's like once you see the combustion engine, it's not that you hate horses; they're just so much less efficient. And so I think this is just like an efficiency upgrade to a system where we're moving energy across the planet. That to me, that's what wins. It's just for to do business in Bitcoin when you don't have centralized authorities constantly adding friction on top of friction on top of friction. At some point, the water just slips through your fingers, and the smart money seeks more friendlier jurisdictions to operate in. I think Bitcoin is probably the most friendly jurisdiction we have. I would say.
Yeah, I just think centralization is easy but it's also, it just doesn't scale. It blows up. I mean, you could make an argument that's why we didn't defeat the Soviet Union with military. It was the thing just grind to a halt. And I think that's what happens. Centralization doesn't work long term. History has showed that. And I try to have, I mean, I'm in London. I'm not going to move to El Salvador or anything. I try to have this conversation with regulators sometimes. I say, okay, what's your goal here? Is it to regulate? Okay, you want to regulate, but why are you regulating? Because you want to catch the bad guys? I don't think this helps you catch the bad guys. I think just cluggers up the system and pushes innovation abroad, and the bad guys are still going to be there. I mean, maybe we should allow transactions to happen. Maybe we should allow illicit transactions to happen, because then you can catch the people doing illicit transactions.
Right.
And sometimes I think they forget what the goal was. Maybe allow illicit transactions, give a bit more money to the cops, to the police, and then catch these guys. And I think that's where I think centralization loses those kind of like narratives sometimes.
Now, how are those conversations going? Are you making any progress there? Are people starting to kind of open their eyes up to the kind of weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of it is education. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of scams in the industry. When I speak to the regulators for my business, they don't actually come across Bitcoin very often. It's the NFT scams. We have this thing where there's these tax scams where people put adverts on the internet. They say, pay us in crypto and we'll reduce your tax by 90%. And poor people do that. So unfortunately, Bitcoin gets wrapped in all that. And I say, well, Bitcoin's a real asset. It's got nothing to do with, donkey picks on the blockchain and Sam Bankman-Fried. And that's the conversations I have. It's not, I think I think in the US, you're a bit more, I think the difference in the US is that you have this mining community, which employs a lot of people. And I think that's why you've probably got better conversations with regulators, because miners clearly employ a lot of people. You've got 20 miners on the NASDAQ. That helps. We don't, Europe does not have cheap energy. We have a few miners in Sweden and Norway, and Iceland, but it's very small, very niche. So the conversation hasn't really been had at that level. But I'm hoping that, as you know, after this bull market, if Bitcoin can be used more as remittance and stable coins on Bitcoin, then I think there'll be a bit more awareness of it. But it takes time.
Yeah, we actually have a whole show on Thursdays just on grid scale energy production. And if you just look at a nighttime picture of the Earth, like the abundance in life is directly mapped on top of cheap energy. So when you can produce a kilowatt, like here in Louisiana, we are sitting on top of so much energy. We only pay 8 cents, 9 cents a kilowatt hour, and the industrial rate's like 4 cents. We've got natural gas just coming out of the ground everywhere. And so we actually export it. Plus, we refine most of the US, us in Texas, provide most of the US oil refinement. And so if you can produce energy cheaply, I think Bitcoin will find you. It'll find your population because it's desperately searching for cheap energy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I think the US. I don't know if it was luck, but just having those miners on the Nasdaq, I think that gives a way to lobby the government or to speak to the government. I think that's been really good for you guys. I mean, Texas.
Yeah.
If you shut down mining, Texas would revolt, wouldn't they? If they hire so many people.
Oh yes, yeah. Pretty much all the Chinese miners moved to Texas.
Yeah,
not perfectly, but for the most part. And actually, my state, Louisiana, passed 2 weeks ago the most pro Bitcoin laws from mining to self custody to running a node, all that stuff into law, so that in an effort to recruit more Bitcoin miners, because we're such an energy rich state. And so I think when you see states and entity or governments competing for miners to come use cheap energy, to me, that's the way to decentralize it, at least because your energy is no longer stranded. Now that Bitcoin is here, you have a customer that will buy all of your energy till the end of time and can trade it globally instantly every 10 minutes. So that's a huge component. And I don't know what Europe does to that, because it seems like they are struggling to make, outside of building nuclear, taking the red tape off of nuclear. I don't see a way around it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, look, the UK has really good engineers. We have nuclear designs, fusion reactors designed by Rolls-Royce, but the regulation has held that back a bit. But I'm hoping that changes.
Yeah,
Obviously,
don't
Germany.
y'all have like huge natural gas finds in the North Sea? Isn't that still a big part of y'all's energy equation?
I'm not an energy expert, but I do spend time in Scotland because I love there. We do have a lot of oil there, but it is more expensive to take out than, say, Texas. We have a lot of wind farms. I mean, the government spent a fortune opening that up. But I still think, I mean, I looked with some people about during COVID of all times, if we could mine in Scotland, but the spare capacity is small. It's not like 200 megawatts. It's like 5 megawatts here, 10 megawatts there.
Okay,
and
yeah.
UK actually does have a good energy grid. And believe it or not, my conversations in Scotland, they were actually using like wasted energy. They were using it to pump sea oil into the oil wells in the North Sea to get oil out, form of fracking. So
yeah, and then there's what we're also discovering is there's let's say you need heat, and I would say your country needs a lot of heat, just climate wise. And so a Bitcoin miner is a great energy source. Heat source. If you're just using the miner to produce heat and the Bitcoin's kind of like a byproduct, then you're not even there for the Bitcoin. You're there because you need to heat your home. And so we're seeing a lot of HVAC people install Bitcoin miners as in the place of a furnace. So a furnace at a home will go out, they'll install Bitcoin miners. And then when you turn your heat on to heat your home, you're mining Bitcoin at the same time.
Yeah, I met a bunch of guys in France that are doing that, and there's been some of the stuff in Norway. They've got that because Norway's this weird country in that it's the north of it is kind of cut off for the main part, so they've built a lot of dams there, and they reuse. I saw a project where they're reusing the heat to kind of like what was it? It wasn't for. It was to heat the local soccer pitches because it freezes over. But apparently that costs a lot. I mean, whatever floats your boat. But it's still, yeah. I think that the
Yeah.
problem with Europe though is regulation. We have a lot of red tape here. A
Is
lot.
there any undoing that? How do y'all? We struggle with that as well, but I think y'all struggle with it on another level.
I
Any
think
luck on?
I don't know. It's beyond. I mean, I've been to I've been to the equivalent of the House of Representatives. I've been to Parliament, and I've said to them, look, I speak to American VCs. They jokingly say to me, we don't want to invest in UK companies because a third goes to law firms to fill out forms, and they just. I sometimes I think in my experience, the UK deregulated a bit in the 80s because things got so bad. I just hope things don't get so bad. So was it Margaret Thatcher, who's a controversial figure, depending who you speak to. She's either hated or loved. But the economy was so bad, she was able to cut down a lot of the red tape. Now I've heard this new government, which they're a bit worried that they're gonna do stuff, but I don't know.
And this is where I think that the developing nations have such an advantage to start from zero, but their zero is connected with iPhones to the world through the internet, and they have really no infrastructure, but they can start building companies like me and you are building, access to the global economy through Bitcoin and the world through the social media apps without the burden of red tape and all these regulations. I don't see how they don't outpace us eventually as these 4 billion people's minds start to contribute to the entrepreneurial endeavors of the planet. Seems like they're going to win in the end if we keep red taping our entrepreneurs to death.
Yeah, the problem we have in the UK has a very good education system. I mean, universities, clearly, if you go to a good UK university, it's not many British people there. It's foreigners from around the world, but they're not staying here. We have a brain drain. I think the difference of, say, now and 20 years ago, 20 years ago was clearly most of our smart kids, I'm putting myself in that bracket maybe, would go to the US. But now I don't know if they go to the US as more. They go to places like Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong. The low tax regimes of those places are attractive. Maybe the sun as well. But in my connect my I read the way I speak to people outside of my Bitcoin world is jiu-jitsu. I go to jiu-jitsu and I see the young kids. They're talking about going to Dubai. They're talking about going to Singapore. They're talking about going to Hong Kong. There's definitely a movement more that way. And they go, why? And they feel it's too hard to get on the property market in London. You need to be a multimillionaire to afford an apartment. And you go there, you have low tax, and it seems it's the place more entrepreneurial.
Well, it seemed like you had a barrier to entry on entering the job market in Dubai or Thailand or places like that. But COVID blew the doors off of that with the whole work from home, create value from home. You now have access to a global population to hire people and work remotely through Zoom and all this other technology. So now it's like, I can live where do I want to live? Who's treating me the friendliest? I actually interviewed BTC Gandalf, Bitcoin Gandalf. Are you familiar with him?
I know the name, and I think, I've seen the tweet.
His name is Daniel, and he's was formerly in the UK, and now he's over in Dubai. And as an example of, if I think they're going to start competing for citizens, the best citizens are now going to be fought over by nations like Dubai. And if the UK and even America doesn't continue to compete well for citizens, they're just going to leave.
It's the sovereign individual, which unfortunately for me, one of them was written by a British guy. I think was it Rees Mogg was one of the writers, was a British guy. But he predicted this. Yeah.
So why are you staying then? And what's holding you back? Just family, or you just like home? Or
I've lived in a few countries, but I mean, look, I'm staying, but my company may move. I can't stop that. So my company's small. There's only 8 of us, but if it gets to the point where there's no point being in the UK, I'm sure the majority, the other guys would move, and I'd just be this remote work in London, paying 80% tax.
So what are the good things about London? Like, tell us what's the heart of it? What keeps you there? Because I live in a similar city. I live in New Orleans, which is kind of maybe not quite as bad as London and stuff, but I just love it. It gets in my skin. I love the culture. I love the people. It's definitely got crime everywhere, but I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, maybe I'm a big city guy. I grew up in one. I love New York. I had nearly 9 years in New York. Loved it. I think what I prefer, I'd say New York is even more crazy than London. London's definitely sleepier than New York. I think I like Europe. One of the things I miss living in New York is when you're in London, you go to the airport, you're a 2 hour flight away from Italy, France, Spain, half an hour flight away from Amsterdam. You can do whatever you want in Amsterdam. I kind of miss that vibe.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's home. I mean, I do have parents that are getting older and sister and stuff. I think that's it. But
Yeah.
yeah, family. So yeah, there's
Yeah.
something about being at home. I mean, I guess if I hadn't have traveled, spent 12 years in the US, and I did live in Amsterdam for a bit and spent some time in Asia, probably maybe I'd have the itch. But I've done that.
Yeah. No place like home. I think eventually you come back.
Yeah, and I don't think things are that. I mean, look, I know if you work in Bitcoin and if you're on Twitter all day, it does feel like the West is dying. But yeah, what can you do? I mean, we're going through an industrial revolution right now.
Right.
I
Well, and
don't
that
know. We
I
are.
agree
We
with
are.
that sentiment because I think, you can join this new nation called Bitcoin and never have to leave. Essentially, your property can move into cyberspace that's, effectively like moving to a new country. Well,
Mhm.
so the whole point of moving to another nation is because you feel like your property, you just can't hang on to it. The king or the local governor can just take what they want. Well, I think Bitcoin stops that and you don't have to move.
Yeah. I mean, look, if I was in my 20s and didn't have any commitments, I'd, I think it's great to travel. I think it's fun. I mean, I think in Europe it's different than the US. The US, you can travel and experience different stuff and still be American. I mean,
Mhm.
the East and the West Coast are very different than say Louisiana. So you got, and I've seen that in the US. A lot of the guys that I knew in New York, that they have done the Florida and Austin, Texas migration.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. Louisiana, really, America's a lot like almost 50 sovereign nations that
mhm.
just kind of under one umbrella. But from state to state, it's amazing the cultural difference, the economic difference,
Mm.
it's night and day different. You really don't feel. I mean, we do speak the same language, we have the same currency. There are some things that make doing business with other states very easy, but culturally, they are huge differences.
Yeah, and when I lived in San Diego, I mean, once a month, I went to Mexico. Now, Tijuana is not the nicest place in the world, but I mean, I saw things in Tijuana you just don't see anywhere in the world. But you drive half an hour past Tijuana, like an hour, and you have a beach to yourself. It's beautiful. No one's on the beach. You can do whatever you want. And it's I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. That's probably the things I miss driving around Mexico. I had a little dirt bike and it was beautiful.
Oh man. All right. So tell us your vision as to where are you building towards? What kind of mission are you on? Kind of inspires you to get up every day and work hard. Where do you see things going?
I mean, I still think Bitcoin is I think as a store of value, it's clearly there. I mean, yes, it's volatile, but people believe in that. But at the medium exchange, there's still a lot of work to be done. Now, my experience is in dealing with Civk is that we probably need better stable coins on Bitcoin. I mean, clearly in the global south, they prefer Tether than Bitcoin, but getting that working on Lightning, there's a lot of work to be done on making Bitcoin easier to buy coffee and making it scale in that way. And I don't think we've solved it. And some people, they're always looking for this new layer two. I think we've got enough layer twos. We've built the protocols. We just need to improve the wallet experience to usability. And I think there's a lot of work to be done. And yeah, Bitcoin is still very niche. I mean, if you work in the industry, if you're on Twitter all day, it feels like it's doing well. But the average guy you meet in other walks of life still doesn't know what Bitcoin is. So
Mhm.
there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of interesting software to be built. And if you're working in software, AI is obviously a big deal. And the convergence of that with Bitcoin is going to be mega. I mean, I think we're at the turning of an industrial revolution. Like when we moved from the working on the farms to working on the factories, I think we're in that kind of like cycle right now. And that's why clearly politically the world is a bit odd. Clearly we've got wars and stuff, but I think that's all culminating the fact we are in an industrial change. I don't know where it's going to end up. I have no idea, but that's why it's fun. So you can either get down and look at your local election, which in the UK wasn't great. Your world is a bit crazy as well. Or you think, look, this is a technical change. A lot of people don't like change. A lot of people don't know where they fit in this change, and just go with it.
Yeah, I think that user interface part is critical, and I think people don't really appreciate the trillion-dollar companies that have budgets to give to software engineers to make the user interface on your iPhone or Android so simple and seamless. And
Mhm.
then we've got this ragtag group of developers that are way underfunded and fragmented, trying to compete
Yes.
with an iPhone app. It's just, David and Goliath playing out
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, and I think, people go to me sometimes, "Why isn't Lightning as good?" And I'm like, "Well, the problem is not there's not much demand for Lightning payments.
Hmm.
If that demand comes, Lightning devs will be able to raise more money. Yeah, there'll be better wallets. I mean, clearly, Facebook, if they wanted to build now, their wallet would probably be very custodial, so maybe not then. But clearly, where there's demand, software finds a way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where I think the problems with centralization are going to actually be the funding source to centralized solutions, and that until those problems get so painful,
Mm.
um, like you said, there's just very little demand comparatively.
It's niche right now,
Yeah.
but I think centralization won't scale. It really won't work with a mobile workforce if people are, hopping different nations all the time. I mean, it was quite hard for me to move to the US. Just from give example, I moved to the US. I have no credit history. I had to basically deposit $200 in a local bank account and pay that off every month for 1 year to build some credit history. And those are
Mhm.
just one things. I think as you get a global workforce, it has to be decentralized because centralized systems will just break. There's
Right.
90. I don't even know how many countries are there in the world. 160? Who knows?
I,
Yeah,
I thought it was 192
there you
sovereign
go.
nation. I don't know, something like that.
But even moving, I mean, people who move from, say, New York to Florida go through hell. It's different driver's licenses, all that kind of stuff. It
Hmm.
doesn't scale very well.
Yeah, and I think Bitcoiners don't have that problem.
No.
If you can transact in Bitcoin, if you've made an economy where you get paid in Bitcoin, I mean, God, your life is so much simpler, so much more
Mhm.
frictionless.
Okay.
Um, I think those guys just have an advantage in the market, and they end up being the winners because they're having to invest less of their time and energy to do what we have to do.
Mhm.
Um, so you think that the future is centralization just breaking as it tries to scale up against decentralization?
I think so. I think it's you're seeing that. I mean, I think Friday with CrowdStrike was just a pure example of centralization just not scaling. And there are a lot of people in the UK, for example, that are being debanked, and these are not Bitcoiners. These are not bad people. They're just people that don't fit in the system because they've got a foreign sounding name or stuff like that. And I think it's going to be very hard. And I think AI has got benefits, it's got negatives. You're going to have more deep fakes, you're going to have more issues with KYC and AML with AI. I mean, do you know the difference between an AI movie now and a normal movie? I don't. I mean, it's like,
We could be
I could be AI right now. I mean, I
AI.
could just be, the real me could be, having a beer somewhere. I could be, I mean, you won't know. I mean, that's the world we're living in. And I
Yeah.
think this is where it's all going to break.
And that's why I really like live content. I feel like
Mhm.
live content, even on Spaces and like this live interview me and you are having, is going to be kind of the last bastion of content that's just censored, unedited, and I think humans are starting to really crave um, unedited, authentic content. And now there's just the whole market is just flooded with content, even more
Mm,
since AI,
mm.
that it's hard to see what's real and what's not.
And it's interesting because I was with a friend the other day and we were looking at, you think of an AI world, what's still got growth. The things in the UK economy that's still growing are experiences like, skydiving experiences,
Mhm.
experience riding a horse, jujitsu experiences. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
people are going to want that more and more because you won't know what's real.
Oh, I
Yeah.
would say as a general, hours allocated to work versus allocated to life experiences, that you're seeing a hockey stick where we're now able to generate revenue very quickly for ourselves and
Mhm.
profit. And so it's like, what do we do with these now excess hours? And
Mhm.
they're being dumped on things like meditation practices, going to a coffee shop, socializing, going to
Mhm.
jiu-jitsu, like personal care, wellness, life experiences. Those industries are exploding in the US.
Mm.
Like there's like a CrossFit gym on every corner. There's yoga gyms on every corner. There's meditation practices. And
I
it's
mean,
just,
that's probably one good thing. I mean, I think,
I think so.
that's yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think overall that's a great thing. It's maybe a first world problem to have, but that's a good problem.
Well, it's amazing how many some billionaires want to become president or want to become God, but a lot of billionaires do go back to nature. They end up buying a house in the middle of nowhere, totally secluded, where they can have forest walks or something. They do the full. Some people just do the full cycle, and
Mhm.
maybe happiness and fun was just being fit and running in the desert or running in the forest. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing that true wealth is just health. Do you have
Mm.
a healthy body? Do you have healthy relationship, healthy mind? Or are you living this super stressed out life where you're just living paycheck to paycheck or climbing the corporate ladder trying to compete that? And
Mm.
a lot of people, especially this newer generation, are starting to say, you know what? I'm not chasing the big paycheck. I'm actually chasing freedom of my time where I can kind of more of a quality of life. I think
Mm.
that's a good thing, actually.
I
Uh,
do. I do. I think I don't certain things that make me happy in life, and it's physical experiences. I guess you can go deep with that, but just doing things that are physical, doing or
so,
camaraderie. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, speaking of that, how did you get into what's your Brazilian or jiu-jitsu journey?
Just at a young age, I was into sports at school, played a bit of rugby. I went through that experience. When you leave school, leave college, it's kind of hard to do team sports. So I ended up going to a boxing gym, did a bit of kickboxing, some Chinese martial arts, and then at one point I started to get a bit too old to get punched in the head. So jiu-jitsu was growing in New York. I went on and off to a few, and it's really just a way of doing fitness. I mean, it's fun. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It pushes you. I mean, I do lift a bit, not much, but going to the gym on your own lifting, that's cool. That's great. But nothing pushes you more than when you're with a crew of guys trying to strangle you. That just makes you dig deeper, and it's stressful. No one likes being under a sweaty man or girl and having their neck cranked. So it makes you zen. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but I like it. It's just a way of doing fitness, and I think, especially if you've got an office job, I mean, you need that.
Yeah, you
And
really do need that outlet, and I think people are more and more using it as a social outlet. I also am part of a running club, and I'm like, I think this is more of a social club first, running club second. It seems like everybody's just
yeah, look,
looking for relationships.
I do have an 11-year-old daughter. I took her to jiu-jitsu. She liked it, but she doesn't feel it. She's obsessed with ballet. I don't give a crap. I mean, just do something. It's ballet, hockey, running, jiu-jitsu, whatever. Just something that makes you move. I think if you're not moving, you're in trouble.
I agree. 100% agree with that. I noticed that, especially among Bitcoiners, I always say Bitcoin is forces a quality audit on your whole life. And so if you have this high quality money, you start looking at your workout routine. And if it's a
Mm.
crap non-existent, you start to upgrade things around you. Have you had that similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, I was I do a podcast with Ray Youssef sometimes. He's kind of like he's a big man physically, muscular wise. We always say we worked out before we got into Bitcoin. But I
Ah,
would say
yeah,
Bitcoin made me a lot more stoic.
yes.
I don't really have any material possessions. I mean, I really like. I mean, my dream in life would be to have two suitcases and a laptop. I'm not going to be there because I've got an 11-year-old kid. I've got a girlfriend, but there's something about not owning much, which is really nice. You realize, and it goes back to that iconic movie Fight Club. The things you own end up owning you. That's one of those beautiful comments. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And like
that
the
is.
idea of me, if Bitcoin goes to, I don't know, $10 million a coin, whatever, I'm not buying a big house, never. When I see those big like 9-bedroom houses, I just think of 9 bedrooms to look after, to manage, and sinks to fix, and I just think of hell there. Yeah, just
Yeah.
being trapped in the matrix.
Yeah. We call that more money, more problems. The more
Exactly.
stuff
Yeah.
you have.
It's
Uh,
like I remember being in the US. Guys used to be obsessed, especially in San Diego. They were obsessed of owning a boat, and everyone that owned a boat told me that the two best days of a boat is when you buy it and when you sell it.
oh,
And that was
yeah.
back in 2002. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer in renting. I stepped off the ownership train I guess about 7 years ago. I said, you know what, ownership is just a liability. Control is what you want. You want control, but not just over your possessions, but over your time. And sometimes your possessions are time robbers. And so if you value your time, possessions are a liability, because your possessions are always needing your attention. Someone's always trying to steal them. They're always breaking. So it depends on. I find that men that really value their time are okay with not owning things that steal time.
And I think, it's not that I live the martial art lifestyle, but you watch things like the old 1970s classic Kung Fu, The Wandering Kung Fu Master, or
Mhm.
the Jedi in Star Wars. The fact that they don't own much, dress humbly, are kind of badass and fit, it's cool. There's something beautiful about that,
There
And
is, there is.
yeah,
Well, it's like that man is free.
yeah,
That over there is
that's
free.
true freedom. It's like
Right.
I always have this conversation, like people, like especially Americans, they ask me, "You live in the UK, but you're ruled by a king and queen." I go, "Yeah, maybe." And he goes, "Doesn't that show injustice? But I don't want their life. You could not pay me enough money to be the king. He can't go to the local pub. He can't go to my jiu-jitsu school. So I
Yeah.
think sometimes I don't care that they have butlers and chauffeurs. They're not free. They're not free from the system.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Bitcoin forces that low time preference mindset where you're just not thinking so immediate gratification. You're kind of thinking long term. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you're not trying to get rid of capital because it's collapsing from underneath itself. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin, it's like, no, if even if I just hang on to it, it's going to increase in value or purchasing power rather. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
or I guess it'd be more accurate to say everything else is collapsing; it's holding still.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what are you going to sell your Bitcoin for? It forces that question more so than the fiat system, which is like grow, acquire, spend. I don't see Bitcoiners spending their Bitcoin frivolously.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're more thought out and much more calculating on what they're going to
I
spend their.
do think you look. We've all bought things with Bitcoin that you now look at and laugh at. I mean, I've probably got very expensive laptops because I bought them with Bitcoin at a very
Yeah,
low price. And, I mean, I don't have a 10 grand pizza, but I mean, that's probably. But that does make you think, though. If you think that the scarcity element does make you think twice about spending Bitcoin to buy things.
right. Yeah, I think the only thing you should spend Bitcoin on is your own time. If
Yeah.
you're buying time, it's a good investment. Not, I don't know.
Mhm. I mean, that's interesting. When Bitcoin becomes more prevalent in society, people are going to question: do I want to buy that? I don't know. I don't know what people buy these days, but everything's going to have a Bitcoin value. That's going to mess with people's head a lot.
Right. Yeah, we had a guy on our show. His name was Madrick, and he paid 6 and 7 Bitcoin for a Trezor wallet. So that's how
Yeah,
early it was.
yeah.
That's what it cost back then. And to think that guy, if you had just hung on to that, but he was big into that same community you were speaking about, that we were all trying to use Bitcoin, and even though we spent it, we would acquire some what we spent. We would.
Well, I am one of the black belts I used to train with in New York. We were okay communal showers, but it's not what you think. So we were in the showers once. And he goes, "Oh, Nick, are you into Bitcoin?" Because I started, I left my job and I was doing this Bitcoin OTC stuff. And he goes, "Yeah, this guy kind of screwed me and gave me Bitcoin instead of paying for a private lesson." I go, "What was his name?" He went, "Roger." And I went, "Roger there?" And we opened his wallet. Now, it was on blockchain.com. And I swear his password was password123. And his eyes lit up, and it was basically 30 grand. And this was in 2015, so God
Wow.
knows how much it was. Yeah, and his eyes lit up. He was like, so we quickly got it off, got it onto a ledger. He sold half of it for like, this guy's very based. His name's Paul Schreider, well-known jiu-jitsu coach. He went on a surfing holiday for half of it, but that's the kind of guy he is. He's very zen. He is a Jedi. And I still speak to him once every year. He normally phones me. He messages me and says, "Nick, shall I sell them my Bitcoin?" I goes, "When are you going to learn?" He goes, "But some guy in New York that I'm having private lessons with teaching tells me Bitcoin's junk and it's going to zero." And I goes,
Don't sell
yeah.
it. Don't sell it. You will regret it. Well, man, it was great talking to you. How can guys find out more about what you're doing, or how can do you need any help with anything as far
Yeah,
as
so I'm on
team?
Twitter, as you know, Gregory_Nico. I'm pushing 2 projects quite hard. Mercury Layer, which is an alternative layer 2 that's built by my company, Commerce Block, and CivKit, which is more for, kind of peer-to-peer trading in countries where they need it. But those are 2 things I'm active in. And yeah, please follow those projects. Yeah, please test our software. If you think it's rubbish, tell us. Sometimes I've noticed it's very hard because I build software. Well, I build UX experiences in a certain way, and it's different for other people. I've noticed that a lot of these I've noticed in the last 2 months, a lot of the Lightning wallets that I like is not suitable for retail. And but this is all great feedback. So.
Yeah, you got to have a tight feedback loop if you want to make
Yeah.
those iterations quickly. That's the best way to grow. Is throw it out there in the market, let the market rip it to shreds, and then rebuild. Well, thank you so much for your time. Where are you going to attend any Bitcoin conventions this year?
Yeah, I didn't go to Nashville. I just didn't really. The flight was about tough, but I'm probably gonna. I tend to do the end of the year ones. So I occasionally write for Bitcoin magazine, so I go to their one either in Amsterdam. Or I think they're doing one in the Middle East, Dubai. So I've said I'll go to that. So.
Okay, fantastic. Well, hopefully I can make some of those. They're trying to rope me in to go to Pacific Bitcoin. I'm going to Nashville along with some of my other hosts, but I'd love to make a European one. Which one would you recommend as far as on your your side of the pond?
Well, the Amsterdam one it's just Amsterdam. That's I won't tell you about Amsterdam, but I'm sure you know its reputation. You can have a lot of fun there. It's the most chilled out city in London, in Europe. It's a great place.
They host one every year in Amsterdam, a big Bitcoin convention.
Yeah, they have been. There's the Prague one that's already happened. I've never been, but my friends who go there tell me it's awesome. Yeah, we have it's a smaller scene, but definitely it's fun. I mean, you get the same people at all conferences, so you got to kind of time it. But I heard I've never been to the Prague one, but I've heard that's top.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, hopefully we can meet you one day. If not, let's do this again. Give me an update later on anything else you got. And appreciate your time.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us.
Yep.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a good day. All right. That was Nick or Nico. Met him on X virtually. So he had some really cool projects he was working on. Check him out if you want to use some of his stuff, give him some feedback on it. I know anybody that's building in the Bitcoin space, any layer 2s or softwares or hardware wallets or hardware in general, need a lot of feedback from the market. So if you're new to Bitcoin, just start using a lot of these solutions. Nico and his team are building some great stuff. So I appreciate your time coming on here today. Again, I'm Craig LeBlanc, your host for the Bitcoin Daily, one of 12 hosts working to build, to produce 8 shows a week, 8 to 10 a.m. every day. And we also have a second show that James does a great job producing on Saturday from 10 to 12. So if you're new to Bitcoin, you want daily content here on X, 8 to 10 Eastern every day, the Bitcoin Daily. Y'all have an awesome day. Love y'all and hope to see y'all in Nashville. Thanks a lot. Bye.